Good morning, everyone. My name is Rick Curtis, and I have the honor of serving the North American Mission Board as the Assistant to the President for Convention and Associational Relations. Hey, it's my honor to come and to do this live stream for you today. There's some outcomes I want to talk about in just a second, but let me give you my email address, rcurtis@nam.net. And also, there's a handout associated with the training when I actually do the training. And the way I set it up is with an email address. So if you would email swat@curtis.net, you don't have to type anything in the email. You just email that, and it will send you a link back that allows you to download the SWOT analysis handout. So again, one quick plug, I do all kinds of different things, consultation for associations and leadership stuff for pastors and church planners and all kinds of stuff like that. So this is my one shameless plug, facebook.com/BRRickCurtis. So you can like that and you can be privy to some of the stuff that I've done online. So I hope that helps. But anyway, so let's jump right to it. Let's talk about outcomes. The reason I'm doing this video today, so this is both a training and kind of a piece so you can see the training, so that if you want me to consult over video and with your association or even with your church and train in the SWOT analysis, I would love to do that for you live. This is a live stream today, but I can do that through Zoom or Ring Central or whatever methodology that you prefer. I can also do it as a live stream, but I want to serve you. Pastors are NAM's #1 customer. We love the guys on the front line, and so anything we can do to help strengthen their organization or your organization as an AMS, we would love to do that. So you can just call me and we can organize a time if you're an association, where you could get all of your pastors together and we could go through the SWOT analysis. We could do it for your association, so that way you can see what your current reality is, and then you can take next steps to go forward. Or we can just train how to do the SWOT analysis, so your guys can then implement that in their own church and begin to do a SWOT analysis with their leadership team. So the outcomes: grasp the purpose and values of a SWOT analysis. I hope that you do that after this short video today. Understand the process of collecting and evaluating SWOT data, and then learn how to design and implement next steps from this analysis. So again, I'm modeling the training here today, but we're not going to take all the time of the training of doing the breakouts and all that kind of stuff. So you'll see in the live stream today that I fade in and fade out and do that kind of thing, but that's because those are breakout moments. So let's do this together. Let's jump right in. The SWOT analysis is really kind of an interesting tool. It's based around two dynamic continuums, if you will. And so the first continuum is those things that are helpful to the organization and those things that are harmful to the organization. Everything that happens within your, and I'm using organization because I know this video will appeal to both pastors and associations. So rather than jumping back and forth between those two, I'm just going to use the word organization. Okay. So helpful to harmful. Everything falls on that continuum, somewhere in that continuum. And we want to discover what those things are. And then the second continuum is also very important, and I'll go vertical with that one. That's those internal factors in the organization and the external factors. Everything that is helpful or harmful falls into an either internal factor or an external factor. And so by crossing these two continuums, obviously, we come up with 4 quadrants, right? And that's the basis of the SWOT analysis. Many of you have done SWOT analysis before. I'm going to show you how to then not just collect the data, which you already know if you've been through it, but then how to process that data in a way that honors our Lord and extends the kingdom of God. So these 4 quadrants, and for those of you that have never done SWOT analysis, let me speak to that for a second. These 4 quadrants are basically the whole part of the whole synopsis, if you will, of what we're trying to collect. Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Those are the 4 things that we look at in the SWOT analysis, and they fall on this matrix somewhere, either helpful to harmful, or internal or external. So let me show you how that comes comes into play. All right. So first of all, notice the strengths. Notice where they lie on the matrix. Strengths are those internal things to the organization that are helpful. right? It's just like us personally, right? We have internal things, internal abilities, capabilities, knowledge, all kinds of things internal to us that are helpful to us and our future. Those are our strengths, right? And it's the same with us personally as it is organizationally. So our strengths are internal and helpful. Then secondly, you've got your weaknesses. And just like us, an organization has things that are internal to itself that are also harmful. And those are the weaknesses. Then we shift down to the lower part of the matrix, and then we look at the opportunities. Opportunities, and this is important, the divide between internal and external is very important, because when we talk about opportunities, we're talking about external things, right, that are helpful to the organization. What are the external opportunities that we can mobilize to that will extend the kingdom of God, empower our leadership, and drive our organization forward? And then lastly, the harmful and external. There are things out there in the environment. Look at our culture right now. The reason I'm doing this on video right now is because of COVID-19. That's a classic example of a threat. It's harmful to the organization, but it's external to the organization. And that's key. External means that we can't do a lot about it organizationally, but we can change our perception of it. And that's key. We're going to talk about that in a little while. Now, look, I've been through this dozens of times with pastors and with associations over a 20-year career in leadership. And I'm here to tell you, this is the most misunderstood category. Threats are external to the organization. I was meeting with a pastor one time and he says, "You don't know Billy. Billy's a threat." And I said, "No, Billy's not a threat. Billy's a weakness because he's internal to your organization." So I want to make that distinction here today and make sure that you realize as you process a SWOT analysis that you keep the threats external, COVID-19 being a perfect example of that, because you need to know how to focus and change your perception of threats. Weaknesses, which are internal, you can do something about those. You can convert those into strengths, or you can get rid of them because they're actionable. Threats are not really actionable. The only thing you can do is to change your perception of them, right? And we see that with COVID. The church has responded. COVID is a threat to the way we do work in the association or in the local church, but we can change our perception of it, converting it into an opportunity to engage with the gospel. So that's the difference. But make sure you keep opportunities and threats external to your church or your association. Okay, so that's a SWOT analysis in a nutshell. So typically what you do as you do a SWOT analysis, and what I would lead you through if you asked me to come and do that by video, is I would lead your group into 4 breakout sessions and then 2 independent breakout sessions where they just work by themselves for a few minutes. And each of the 4 breakout sessions would be a group, right? So we would group your people together to think about the strengths, the weaknesses, the opportunities, and the threats. And those are the 4 breakouts. And so I never poison the well. And hear me on this. This is important to understand. If I gave examples of what a strength is, that's the first thing people are going to think. And I'm going to poison the well and I'm going to pigeonhole the conversation. So I never, when I lead these analyses, I never, ever poison the well. So, but I do ask them to ask leading questions. So I want to give you an example of leading questions and in each category. So that way, even as you perform a SWOT analysis with your people after training, that you would not poison the well either. You can't offer strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. I just gave one for COVID-19. And if you did that in a group, everybody would write as their first threat COVID-19. So poisoning the well as a leader is a detrimental thing. You want your people to think and to put some sweat equity into turning the gears to get the stuff in. So I pose leading questions to help them think through each of these categories. So let me run through some of those with you so you're aware how your people will be led if either you're leading a SWOT analysis or I'm doing that for you. All right, so the first would be strengths. Right before the breakout, I would encourage your people that I would reinitialize the knowledge. Okay, these are internally helpful items. What advantages does this organization have? All right. What are the strong points of it? Who are the strong leaders? What are their characteristics? You got to ask those questions. What does your organization do better than other organizations? Right. Those are the capitalizing things. Those are things you can capitalize on to move the gospel forward in your organization. And then what do observers see as your strength? See, unpacking what your strengths are goes beyond what you know. And that's why we break them into groups, is because you know as well as I do, as a leader, the sum of two leaders together is more than the sum of just those two leaders' wisdom. You create a dynamic where the whole intellectual exercise rises to a whole nother level. So much more so when you have 4 or 5 people in a group, or I don't recommend more than 6 or 7 in a breakout group for a SWOT analysis. Everybody needs time to speak. I try to break people into groups of 4 or 5 at the most, and let that magic happen as they begin to discuss the strengths, and thoughts lead to other thoughts, and that dynamic is wonderful. And there's a handout that allows them to do that. So those are some of the leading questions I would ask them to ask as they broke into the strengths group. All right. And then that leads to the next quadrant, which is weaknesses. And so I'm reminding them that this is internally harmful. Right? These are the internally harmful factors in the organization. What does the organization need to improve? What should you immediately remove from the organization, or what do observers see as your weaknesses, right? So these are things that can harm us. They're harmful to the organization, and we want to dig deep here and ask our people. Look, as a leader, and I know you know this, as a leader, the things that hurt us the worst are the things we don't know, right? And think about that for a second. The things we don't know, we don't know. If you're familiar with the Johari window, the Johari window is the quadrants of knowledge, and I've done other videos on that. You can look them up. But it's also a quadrant, just like the SWOT analysis, but it looks at the things we know, the things we don't know that we know, the things we know we don't know, and the things we don't know we don't know. Now, if you just got confused, I don't blame you. You can Google the Johari window and you can kind of process that yourself. But as a leader, even as a pastor, as a director of missions or AMS myself, I always ask my A team, my administrative team, guys, what don't I know that I need to know? Because their ears hear things that I don't hear. And so that was my first question with my leadership team. I always wanted to know what I needed to know that I didn't know, because those things will bite you. That's what's great about the weaknesses quadrant. You can discuss some of those things, and you can learn what your weaknesses are, even those that you don't see, because what better thing to act on than your own weaknesses and converting those into strengths. All right. So then the next category we look at are the opportunities. Again, I remind your people, I remind you that these are external to the organization. So we're asking questions like, what current trends should the new organization be addressing? What missional opportunities are being neglected or missed? And what people needs are not being addressed. Those are the opportunities. Remember, they're external. So if we're talking about gospel advancement, what are those things that we need to do? What are the things that are right there before us that we need to capitalize on and move on as an organization to further the kingdom of God and to allow his gospel to go forward. All right. And then the last category obviously is threats. And we talked a little bit about those already, but let me give you the leading questions that I would start with. I would remind them again that these are externally harmful items. What barriers does the new organization face? What factors move against the organization? And what are the environmental threats? What are the social threats, the governmental threats, the economic threats? Hey, listen, I live in California. I've been doing ministry in California my entire life. For over 30 years, I've been ministering the gospel in California. And as a church planter, let me tell you, there are governmental threats. There are social threats in California. There are moratoriums against new churches in certain geographies, all those kind of things. So you're asking those questions. What is out there that threatens our forward motion for the gospel? All right, so those are the 4 quadrants. So then what I will do with your folks is I will take them into breakout. And so let me describe that a little bit, or let me tell you how I do that, depending on the amount of time. I can do a SWOT analysis training in literally 2 hours with your people. It's a bit rushed. This example is based on 2 hours. If you can get it out to 2.5, that's even better. It gives us a little more time for processing. But 2 to 2.5 hours, even 2 to 3, I could even make 3 work, but it gets a little bit long. So 2.5 hours is kind of a sweet spot for a SWOT analysis, training and implementation, right? It's quick, but they also have videos like this that they can refer back to and process further. Okay, so here's how I encourage the breakouts. I talk to them about, hey, now you're going into your first breakout, and that's going to be around the strengths. And you have a handout in your packet. And in this case, like I said, this has been designed for a 2-hour breakout. I give them literally 13 minutes in a breakout. And because it's it's a live stream or an online event, we utilize the chat room in the training. So what I'll do is I'll tell them, hey, you've got 2 minutes to get to know each other, because hear me on this. The SWOT analysis is as much a data gathering tool and an action tool as it is a relational tool. But with the sequestration and us doing it on video, it's kind of hard to get that relational aspect. But when you've got, let's say you're an associational leader and you're gotten all your pastors together for this SWOT analysis, you're bringing guys in from all different parts of your geography. And a lot of those guys haven't met each other, or they don't really know each other yet. This is a golden opportunity to build those relationships, because every time you do a breakout, you mix it up. You put different people into the breakout so they get to know each other. And you know as well as I do, as people learn about each other, the organization grows stronger. It's the same as if you're doing a SWOT analysis in a church. You throw 4 of your leaders together, or 4 laymen together in the same area, you're knitting together relationships in this event that fortify the relational baseline of your organization. All right. And so here's what I do. I give them 13 minutes in a breakout, and I tell them the first 2 minutes, get to know each other. And remember, that's only 4 or 5 in a breakout. So that's 30 seconds each. So I challenge them to do 3 things. I say, hey, tell us who you are. Tell us what your ministry assignment is, right? Well, how are you ministering? Because you'll have laymen, you'll have pastors, you'll have all different people. So what's your ministry assignment, or what do you do for a job, or whatever? Even in a church situation, you'll have laymen. So you want them to introduce each other. And then tell me one interesting thing about yourself. But they only have got 30 seconds. If there's 4 in the room, they've only got 30 seconds to do it. So it keeps it kind of tight, but at least they get an introduction to each other. That's why a little bit extra, if you go out to 2.5 hours, you can add a prayer time together or whatever. You can tailor it for your people. All right. And then I say you have 1 minute to assign a leader, and that leader has one and only one responsibility, is when they come out of the group. Well, let me back up just a little bit for you. So the 1 minute you assign a leader, and then 10 minutes to flesh out the data. So you're going into a strength breakout, you're fleshing out for 10 minutes, you're fleshing out what are the strengths of our organization. And so you're writing those down. And then after 8 minutes of that 10, I'll send in a flag, or whoever's leading the online session for me, I'll send in a 2-minute warning flag. And at 2-minute warning, you need to take all those strengths and you need to prioritize them into the top 3. And so when that happens, the leader takes over. So in those last 2 minutes, as the prioritization is happening, they're either typing it into their computer, or they're doing something. They're making notes on what the top 3 priority strengths are. And their responsibility when we come back out of the breakout is they chat those top 3 strengths into the chat box. So let's say you've broken into 10 different groups of 4, right? All of a sudden, the chat box just gets inundated with strengths, the top 3 priority strengths from each group. And then what happens is whoever's leading that for me, or me myself, I will consolidate those later on for the analysis for the leaders, right? So I'll take all those strengths and I'll prioritize them based on how many come in, and how many of any one or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 come in, and I'll prioritize those. And then I will analyze those later on and provide that analysis to the leadership. All right, so that helps you as a leader of the group to really drive down deep into the data and be able to think about how to process that. So again, 2 minutes to get to know each other, 1 minute to assign a leader, and then the leader would chat the top 3 strengths out in the chat box when they come out, and then 10 minutes to process the data. And that's broken down into 8 minutes of listing and 2 minutes of prioritization. Okay, so that happens. And then, so I give them another handout that allows them to work that. You'll notice that there's 4 quadrants on the handout. So the first breakout, you're working in strengths. Second, you're working in weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So it plays out just like you're seeing on screen now. I am coaching the guys through each of the handouts, and then I dismiss them into break. So I say, okay, guys, we'll see you in 13 minutes. And then I process out. Okay, so that's how that works. So after 13 minutes, I come back in and I talk to them. I remind them, hey, room leaders, this is the moment. Use the chat room to record the top 3 strengths from your breakout. And then I send them to weaknesses. We're just going to go through that so you see. And then 13 minutes later, I pull it back out and I remind them, use the chat room to record your top 3 weaknesses. Next room is opportunities. I remind them of the leading questions each time so that they're prepared when they get into breakout. And then I tell them I'll see you in 13, and I come back in 13 minutes for the 4th and final breakout, reminding them to chat the opportunities and reminding them of the leading questions to ask for threats. And then I dismiss them out, telling them I'll see them in 13 minutes, and I open the room back up. Now, I ask the room leaders to bring those top 3 priority threats back into the chat room. And I've now collected tons of data. Right? I've collected that data that I'm going to go and spend the time to process that data for you as the leader if you're leading this group. And that way I can provide you quality, substantial data on your current reality, right? We're evaluating the strengths, the weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And then I'm going to spend some time with you after the 2.5 hour event, whether it be over the next few days or as long as it takes, to help you process that data into some really good next steps. But I also, so here's really kind of the interesting thing. That's the SWOT analysis in a nutshell. That's the data gathering portion of it. But you also need to process the data, and that's what's important. I've done a lot of SWOT analysis where people just take the data and they don't do anything with it. And it's a little bit frustrating because at that point it's worthless. Why are you gathering data if you're not going to act upon it, right? And so acting upon it is the most necessary thing. Data is good, but if you don't do anything with it, it's worthless. So I then, and here's how we describe it. If I'm doing this for an association in particular, this is how I lead with this, right? I said, okay, guys, I want to talk to you about being a value add. On behalf of your associational leaders, I want to thank you today because you have added value to the association. Your collective wisdom has helped this association take its next steps into the future, and you've added such tremendous value. But your leaders here in the association, they wanted to make sure that today's event wasn't just all about you adding value to them. They want to add value to you. So from this point on in the SWOT analysis training, we want to train you how to process the data. That way you can take a SWOT analysis back to your leadership team and you can train them in the SWOT analysis, discovering what your current reality is, and then enabling you to process that data so that you can move into the future. That's how the association today wants to add value to you. So from this point on, guys, thank you for adding value to the association. Now we want to add value to you in continuing this SWOT analysis training. So that's what I do. I kind of give that spiel there right at this point in the presentation, because I want every single leader, if they're the leaders of the church or they're the pastors in the association, to know how uniquely and truly valuable they are to the organization. An organization is only as important as its people. And if you don't value your people, you're sunk. People make it work, especially our pastors. Our pastors are on the front line. They are day in and day out. And you can liken it to whatever you want, the analogy of a general or whatever, however you want to do that. But generals are unimportant other than this big kind of strategy piece. The people who get it done are the ones that are in the foxholes. They're the ones that are in danger. They're the ones on the front line. And that's our pastors. And so we need to recognize that and add value to them. So, all right. So just to recap, we've collected the data. We've said, these are our strengths. These are our weaknesses. These are our opportunities, and these are our threats. Now, what do we do with them? All right, this is where the SWOT analysis really comes into play. All right, so let's talk about that. I've mocked up 3 priority strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats in the grid that you see on the screen. All right, and we're going to talk about matching, because the one thing you want to do is you want to match your strengths to opportunities that are there. Okay, so notice, matching asks the question, which opportunities can be matched with which strengths to create a mobilization? That's the crux of this entire exercise, right? You have opportunities to extend the kingdom, to bring the gospel to people out there, outside of your organization, and you've got strengths to match those two, but there's no mobilization in process. This helps you discover where those strengths match with those opportunities. So let's say you're looking at your top 3 priority strengths here, and you're looking at your top 3 opportunities, and all of a sudden a light bulb goes on and you say, hey, you know what? Opportunity 1 is a perfect match to our strength number 2. Well, what do you do with that? Obviously, you match it and you mobilize. And so immediately, look, let me talk to you about matching. When you can successfully match something, you have no excuse not to act on that. You know that you're going to have a modicum of success, if not great success, because you have a strength to match it to, right? There is no reason, kingdom-wise or leadership-wise or any other reason, not to begin to move in this mobilization, because you have both the strength and the opportunity. So, hey, let me introduce another tool to you here real quick, because there's a tool that I use all the time, and we're all familiar with something similar to this. This is called the PMI tool. It's used corporately. It's used in other churches and other organizations, nonprofits, etc. I use it all the time. It really serves it's the most simple tool in the world. It really is. And it's just a conversation starter. It's not a magic aha machine or anything like that. It's just a conversation starter. Let me tell you, we've all kind of done this already. Let's say back in the day when you were deciding which college to go to, you probably listed the pros and the cons, right? It's similar to that. You're asking what's positive about this situation, what's a plus, what's a minus of this situation, right? There's your pro and your con. But then it gives you a third category. What's interesting, right? You're asking the question, what's interesting about this? Because there are things that might not immediately appear as either a plus or a minus, but they're definitely an interesting bit of data that you need to process, right? Later on down the path, you might find that that's either a plus or a minus, but right now it's just interesting, and it allows some creative conversation. The PMI does that. So once you match opportunity 1, in this case, to strength number 2, in this case, you do a PMI just as a conversation starter. You get the team together, you ask the individual. Once you make a match, you need to ask, all right, who's going to pull this off? It might be a team, it might be an individual, you might just have to cut a check. You know, who knows what that match would be or how it would fall. But once you put a team together, if that's the case, do a PMI exercise just to get your thoughts started and generating. It helps kick that off. And then you take that PMI and the team and you mobilize to it. You begin to ask, hey, what are our first next steps? All right, so then we go back. So we've created a single mobilization here. So now let's go back to the SWOT analysis and let's look for other opportunities for match. And as we're perusing the list, we might see that all of a sudden, opportunity 3 connects itself perfectly with 2 strengths, strength number 3 and strength number 1. So immediately, just like I said before, we can immediately make that match and begin a mobilization. Throw out a PMI exercise. And by the way, PMI exercise is also in the handout packet. So when they send that email to swat@curtis.net, it comes back with a link and to download all those PDF files. So they have the PMI exercise there. So this time we've matched 1 opportunity to 2 strengths, and we can move forward with a PMI exercise based on that. So that's matching. All right. Now let's ask some questions here. We're going to actually not ask some questions. Sorry about that. We're going to go into a 3-minute time. Okay, so at this point, what I do is I send them to their handout and I ask them, all right, you're going to take a few moments now, 3 minutes in this case, or if you're doing a 2.5-hour training with your people, then we would go 5 minutes here. But we're asking them to look over their strengths and their weaknesses and to match them. And that way, this is where the light bulb starts going off. This is where the connections start being made for how they do matches. And this is really where the ahas come in. And we encourage them to go through that process so they're well equipped to process the data. And then also this is where they can start to think through how they would implement a PMI exercise as a conversation starter. So that 3 minutes will, or 5 minutes depending, will play out, and then I'll come back on to readdress the last part of matching. So let's do that now. All right, so matching. We've already looked at making 2 matches here that led to mobilizations, and we have decided that we're going to do a PMI exercise for each of those. But let me ask you this, what do we do with opportunity 2? Opportunity 2 obviously is not able to match with a strength, right? So we see opportunity there, and remember, it's a priority, right? Because it's one of our top 3 priority opportunities. However, we just can't find a strength to match it to. So what do? Nothing. You don't do anything. You never match or you never move on an opportunity that you don't have a strength to match it to. That takes organizational capital. It takes organizational energy, to the detriment of the other things that you do with excellence. You need to be really careful here. Let me share a quick story with you from when I was a pastor, church planter in the late 90s. For the first 18 months, we didn't have any kind of youth group. And that killed me. We had young families come in and go out. And every time they went out, they said, well, you don't have a youth program. But I knew well enough, and I listened to wise counsel that said, hey, if you don't have the bandwidth to pull it off, if you don't have the finances to pull it off, if you don't have the ability to pull it off, the personnel to pull it off, don't do it. It takes away from the strength of the organization. And as painful as it was, and as much as I wanted to jump into youth ministry, I listened to that wise counsel and I prevented that from happening. And we had a really successful church plant. I would venture to say that our church plant would not have been as successful had we defrayed our energies into things that we didn't have strengths for. And I didn't even know about a SWOT analysis at that time, but I knew enough to know that if I didn't have the strengths to match to that opportunity, that I should not move forward in that. Okay, so now let's talk about the next section of the SWOT analysis, and that's converting or conversion. Converting asks which weaknesses can be converted to strengths, or for that matter, which strengths can be converted into opportunities. This is a lateral action, right? So in other words, what weaknesses can we move over to strengths, or what threats can we move over to opportunities? And so I want to give you a process to be able to do that. So let's look at it. Weakness number 1. We need to ask the question around weakness number 1. Is there an opportunity? Is there something we can do to convert weakness number 1 into a strength? So what do? We ask the question. We ask, is this a one and done? Is this something that we can just boom, do really quick? Maybe you have an equipment deficiency, right? And if it's a one and done, it's easy. Pay $150, get the piece of equipment, boom. A weakness is no longer a weakness, it's a strength. And we move on to the next one, right? The one and dones are real easy, but most weaknesses are complex. They're personnel issues, they're administrative level issues, they're systems issues, they're things that are going to take thought, strategic planning, mobilizing a team or a crowd or a group of people to make this conversion. So you begin to ask, okay, what are the steps? What do we need to do? And here's where we have to balance, right? Because we have 3 priority weaknesses. So then we move on to the next question and we say, okay, well, what about weakness 2? How do we convert that into a strength? So we begin to ask these questions. And what I recommend, especially associationally or in a church, is that you put teams together and you begin to ask the questions. Okay, what are the next steps in doing this? I'm talking about the one and done, right? The one and done you just take care of, but these are more complex. So get a team together, do a PMI exercise. I love the PMI exercise because of its simplicity and it's highly effective. It really is. to start the conversation, not to find the answers, but to start the conversation. So you have weakness 1 and weakness 2, and you've determined as a group to convert those into strengths. Ultimately, you want to convert all your weaknesses into strengths, right? Because we don't want weaknesses in our organization. Now, let me ask you though, is there any organization on the face of the planet that has no weaknesses? Absolutely not. But remember, these are the 3 priority weaknesses, so we need to get rid of them. We need to move them on. Let's convert them to strengths. Or what do we do if weakness, for example, weakness 3 here? What if this is something that we just can't convert into a strength? What do? We just got to get rid of it. That's the answer. I don't want to default to people issues, but organizations have people issues, right? So maybe this is a church member that really just needs to leave, or a staff member that needs to move on or move into a different position so they're not a weakness anymore. There's just some times where things have to be moved. Maybe there's an administrative process or a systems process that just needs to be completely eliminated. It is taking so much capital and processing time and money to keep afloat that it's just not working. This is a weakness. Get rid of it. Just get rid of it. That's the best thing to do. You want to get rid of your priority weaknesses. All right. So now this is where we move into that reflection time again, and we take 3 minutes or 5 minutes with a 2.5-hour program. We take the time to allow our people to work through the weaknesses that they see on the worksheet or the handout that they received. So they're looking at their weaknesses and they're beginning the thought process on, okay, how do I convert these into strengths? And so this allows them to begin to process, begin to receive the ahas. They begin to see how the SWOT analysis works in its simplicity. And they also get to think through a PMI exercise and just say, hey, I see how this works. Listen, having your leaders know and being aware of the processes that you're implementing is valuable to you. Here's what I want to say about that. Decision-making is often the mantle that the leader wears. Ultimate decision-making has to be that mantle. But it really helps when your people can see the process by which those decisions are made. How many of us have made a decision and it is blown up in our faces because nobody knows how we made the decision? Even if it's the right decision, the people question how. You put a team together, you do a SWOT analysis, you show them how you're matching strengths to opportunities and you're moving on that opportunity. You show them how you're converting a weakness to a strength and you begin to move on that opportunity, and they were privy to that process. There's no questioning the forward going of the organization because they see the process. There's no obscurity there, and that's amazingly valuable. So let me ask you this. We talked about the one and done, right? We spend $150, get it done. It's a piece of sound equipment. We need to convert a weakness to a strength. Let's just do it. Let's get it done. That's a one and done. But how do you prioritize 2 equally complex weaknesses, right? You look at weakness 1 and weakness 2 and you say, boy, these are a bit complex. They're going to take a whole new administrative process, or they're going to take a team of people to pull this off. They are complex at some level. They're going to take some serious finances, whatever. There's complexity, right? How do you prioritize? Because listen, we've already mobilized the 2, right? We mobilized the opportunity 1 and opportunity 3 already back before. And so those are taking organizational bandwidth away from us. And so we need to be very targeted and very specific on how much bandwidth we expend organizationally, right? We're already mobilizing to opportunity number 1 and opportunity number 3. Now we need to mobilize weakness 1 and weakness 2 and convert those into strengths. Maybe we don't have the bandwidth to pull that off. So we ask the priority question. How do we prioritize? Well, remember opportunity 2? Remember, opportunity 1, 2, and 3 were our priorities. These are things that we wanted to. And remember how earlier in the exercise, our heart ached because we had opportunity 2 to see the gospel go forward, the kingdom advance, yet we didn't have the strengths to match them to. Well, this is where the prioritization question gets asked, right? So look, follow me on this. What if weakness 1, we're asking a question, what if weakness 1 could become a strength? Would we be able to match that to opportunity 2? Because that's the one opportunity we're not able to mobilize to right now, right? And we determine no. If we convert weakness 1 to a strength, it will not match opportunity 2. So then we move on to weakness number 2. If we match, or if we convert weakness number 2 to a strength, will it match with opportunity 2? And we determine, yes, it will. Well, then that's our mobilization. We do a PMI exercise to get the conversation started. We assemble the team, we empower the individual, we spend the money, we do whatever we need to do to mobilize on opportunity number 2. Notice, when weakness 2 becomes a strength, it's a perfect match for opportunity number 2. We would be neglectful not to mobilize to that. So that becomes our priority. Pretty easy, right? Great. Hey, so that's the SWOT analysis training in a nutshell. I hope you can see how I play that out before you and your people. This training should serve as a training itself. So you can take this training, work on a SWOT analysis yourself, do a little background study on the implementation of a SWOT analysis, and I give that to you free. Take it. Yeah, empower your people. Let them be trained in a SWOT analysis. It's such a valuable tool. But if I can help in any way, again, I would love to help. At the end of the SWOT analysis, I generally do a Q&A time where your people can ask questions, and you can chime in on that with me and answer those questions. But again, before I go, I just want to say thank you. Thanks for investing this amount of time with me today to see how I train in the SWOT analysis. I encourage you to think about putting a SWOT analysis out there for your people. If you're an associational leader, and if I can help and I can come in via video and coach your people in the way that you just saw me do this, I would love to serve your association and your warriors in that way. I would love to help empower them for the future. If I can serve in any way, my email address is right there, rcurtis@nam.net. Thank you for taking the time with me today on this live stream. God bless you. I pray that the kingdom would advance through your leadership and through your influence. God bless you and have a great day.